The night Claire Harper showed up at his door soaking wet and shaking, Daniel Reed realized that sometimes the people protecting you are the ones who need protecting most. Daniel was 41, a furniture restoration specialist who worked out of a converted garage behind his rental house in a quiet part of Portland. He had been divorced for 3 years from a woman named Vanessa, who had decided that stability was suffocating and that Daniel's contentment with a simple life was actually a lack of ambition. The breakup had been civil enough that they still shared a few mutual friends, though Daniel had quietly stepped back from most of those connections. It was easier that way. He wasn't bitter, just tired of being the topic of concerned conversations at dinner parties he no longer attended. It was a Thursday night in late October when the knock came. Daniel had been sanding down a cedar chest that smelled like someone's grandmother's attic, the kind of smell that made him think of photo albums and handwritten recipes. The rain had started around 6 and hadn't let up. It drummed against the metal roof of the garage in a steady rhythm that usually helped him think. The knock was hard enough that he heard it over both the rain and the low hum of the space heater in the corner. When he opened the side door, Claire was standing under the narrow overhang, rain dripping from her dark hair onto a gray wool coat that was soaked through at the shoulders. Her face was pale, her eyes red in a way that suggested she had been crying recently, but was trying very hard not to start again. She was 38, a high school English teacher with the kind of sharp observational humor that made her exhausting at parties and deeply loyal in private. She had been Vanessa's best friend since college. Daniel had always liked her, even after the divorce, though they had barely spoken in the last 2 years. Claire. He stepped back instinctively. What's wrong? She didn't answer right away. She looked past him into the garage, at the workbench and the cedar chest and the warm orange glow of the space heater, and then back at him. Can I come in? Just for a minute. He pulled the door wider and gestured her inside. She stepped in carefully, like she was worried about tracking mud, though the floor was already covered in sawdust and wood shavings. Daniel grabbed an old flannel jacket from a hook on the wall and handed it to her. Here, you're soaked. Claire took it without protest and wrapped it around her shoulders. She stood there for a moment, not sitting, not moving toward the heater, just standing in the middle of his workspace, looking like she was trying to decide whether she had made a terrible mistake. Finally, she said, I've been lying to her about you. Daniel blinked. What? Vanessa. Claire's voice was steady but quiet. I've been lying to her about you for 2 years, and tonight she found out. Daniel set down the sanding block he hadn't realized he was still holding. I don't understand. Claire pulled the jacket tighter. After the divorce, she kept asking me if I had seen you, if I knew how you were doing, if you were dating anyone, and I kept telling her no, that I hadn't heard anything, that you were probably fine. She paused, her jaw working like she was trying to get the words out correctly. But I have been checking in on you. Not in a creepy way. Just asking around, making sure you were okay, because I knew she wouldn't, and I knew someone should. Daniel stared at her. Why would you do that? Because you deserved it. The words came out harder than she seemed to intend. She softened immediately. Because she left you, and everyone acted like it was mutual, and I watched you pretend it didn't hurt, and I thought someone should at least care whether you were still standing. The rain got louder. Daniel turned and walked over to the workbench, leaning against it because he wasn't sure what else to do with his hands. So what happened tonight? Claire followed him halfway, stopping near the heater. She found out I had lunch with your sister last month. Emily posted a photo on Instagram. Vanessa saw it. She called me an hour ago and asked why I was spending time with your family if I hadn't been keeping tabs on you, and I couldn't lie anymore. She exhaled slowly. So I told her the truth, that I had been checking in, that I thought you were a good person who got a bad deal, and that I was tired of pretending I didn't think she was wrong. Daniel turned around. You said that to her? I said that to her. Claire's mouth twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. She hung up on me. I've known her for 20 years, and she hung up on me. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. The rain continued its percussion against the roof. The heater clicked softly. Claire looked down at her hands, which were still shaking slightly, though whether from cold or adrenaline Daniel couldn't tell. I'm sorry, she said finally. I shouldn't have come here. I just didn't know where else to go. I didn't want to go home and sit with it alone, and I couldn't call any of our mutual friends because they're her friends first, and I just... She stopped herself. I'm sorry. Daniel shook his head. Don't be. He crossed the space between them and pulled over a second stool from the corner, setting it near the heater. Sit down. You're shaking. Claire hesitated, then sat. Daniel grabbed a clean towel from a drawer under the workbench and handed it to her. She pressed it against her hair, blotting the rain out in silence. After a moment, she said, You're not mad. Why would I be mad? Because I inserted myself into something that wasn't my business. Because I made it worse for you by association. Because now Vanessa's going to think you put me up to this somehow. Daniel sat down on the stool across from her. I don't care what Vanessa thinks. I stopped caring about that a long time ago. He paused. But I do care that you just lost a 20-year friendship because you decided to be decent. Claire looked at him then, really looked at him, and something in her expression shifted. I didn't lose it because I was decent. I lost it because I should have said something 2 years ago and didn't. I should have told her she was wrong when she said you weren't enough. I should have told her that what she called boring, other people call stable. That what she called unambitious, other people call content. Her voice cracked slightly. But I didn't, because I was afraid of losing her. And tonight I realized I had already lost the version of her I actually liked. The words hung in the air between them. Daniel didn't know what to say to that. He had spent 3 years building a quiet life that didn't require justification, and here was someone who had been justifying him in private the entire time. It felt strange. Not bad strange. Just unfamiliar. Claire set the towel down on her lap and looked around the garage. Her gaze landed on the cedar chest.
What's that?
Estate sale find. Someone's great aunt. It's been in a basement for 40 years. I'm trying to bring it back. She stood and walked over to it, running her fingers along the curved top. It's beautiful. It will be. Daniel joined her at the workbench. Right now it's mostly potential. Claire smiled faintly. That's a very you thing to say. Is it? Yes. You see what things could be instead of what they are. Vanessa used to complain about it. She said you were always fixing broken things instead of just replacing them. Daniel picked up the sanding block again, turning it over in his hands. She wasn't wrong. I do that. It's not a flaw. Claire's voice was quiet but firm. It's the best thing about you? Daniel looked at her. She was still wearing his jacket, still damp around the edges, still looking like she had just walked through something she couldn't take back. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like someone was seeing him clearly. Stay for coffee, he said. Or tea. Or whatever you want. You shouldn't drive like this. Claire hesitated, then nodded. Okay. They walked back to the house through the rain, not talking, just moving together under the narrow beam of the porch light. Inside, the kitchen was warm and cluttered in the way of someone who actually used it. Daniel put the kettle on while Claire sat at the small wooden table near the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. Do you ever regret it? She asked suddenly. Daniel turned. Regret what? The divorce. Not fighting harder? Letting her go? He thought about it. No, I regret that it hurt. I regret that I didn't see it coming sooner. But I don't regret letting her go. She wanted something I couldn't give her, and trying to force it would have just made us both miserable. Claire nodded slowly. That's a very healthy way to see it. Therapy helped. She laughed, a short surprise sound. You went to therapy? For 6 months. Turns out it's useful. The kettle whistled. Daniel poured 2 mugs of tea and brought them to the table, sitting down across from her. Claire wrapped her hands around the mug and stared into it like it might have answers. I don't know what I'm going to do, she said. All of our friends are her friends. My entire social life is built around her. Then you'll build a new one. Just like that? No. Not just like that. It'll be hard and it'll take time and you'll probably feel like you made a mistake more than once. He took a sip of his tea. But you'll do it? Because you're tougher than you think you are. Claire looked up at him. How do you know that? Because you just walked through the rain to tell the truth to someone you barely talk to anymore. That's not something scared people do. Her eyes filled just slightly and she blinked hard. I'm not tough. I'm terrified. That's what makes it tough. They sat there for a long time, drinking tea and listening to the rain. At some point, Claire asked about the cedar chest, and Daniel explained the restoration process in more detail than she probably wanted. She listened anyway. At some point after that, Daniel asked about her job, and Claire told him about a student who had just turned in an essay comparing Frankenstein to modern social media, and it was either brilliant or completely insane, she couldn't decide which. They talked about books and furniture and the particular kind of loneliness that came from realizing the life you had built was smaller than you thought. It was past midnight when Claire finally stood to leave. The rain had softened to a drizzle. Daniel walked her to the door and watched as she shrugged out of his jacket and handed it back. Thank you, she said, for not making this weird. It is weird, Daniel said. But that's okay. Claire smiled, a real one this time. Can I come back? Not tonight. Just sometime. To check in. Like a normal person. I'd like that. She nodded, pulled her coat tighter, and stepped out into the drizzle. Daniel watched her walk to her car, watched her headlights sweep across the driveway, watched until the red taillights disappeared around the corner. Then he went back inside and sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at the 2 empty mugs and thinking about the strange way people came back into your life when you stopped expecting them to. Over the next 3 months, Claire came back 6 more times. Never announced. Always in the evening. Sometimes she brought takeout. Sometimes she just showed up and sat in the garage while Daniel worked, reading a book or grading papers under the warm glow of the work light. They didn't talk about Vanessa. They didn't talk about the fallout. They just existed in the same space, comfortable and unhurried, building something neither of them had a name for yet. It was late January when everything shifted. Claire had brought Chinese food, and they were eating at the kitchen table, arguing about whether a movie adaptation had ruined a book or saved it, when she set down her chopsticks and said, "I need to tell you something." Daniel looked up. "Okay. I didn't just come here that night because I needed someone to talk to." Her voice was careful, measured. "I came here because I wanted to see you, because I had been thinking about you for months and I didn't know what to do with it." The room went very quiet. Daniel set down his own chopsticks. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that somewhere in the last 2 years I stopped checking in on you because I felt obligated and started checking in because I cared. And I didn't realize how much until I was standing in your garage soaking wet trying to justify why I had driven across town in a rainstorm just to tell you the truth." She exhaled slowly. "And I know that's complicated. I know it's messy, but I needed you to know." Daniel didn't move. His heart was doing something erratic that felt too big for his chest. "Claire, you don't have to say anything," she said quickly. "I just needed to say it out loud. Because I'm tired of lying. To her. To you. To myself." He reached across the table and took her hand. She looked down at their joined hands like she couldn't quite believe they were real. "I've been thinking about you too," he said quietly. "I didn't want to. I thought it was just gratitude or loneliness or something equally stupid. But it's not." Claire looked up, her eyes searching his. "What is it then?" "I don't know yet." He smiled faintly. "But I'd like to find out." She didn't let go of his hand. Neither did he. The takeout containers sat forgotten between them, cooling slowly in the warm kitchen light. Outside, it started to rain again, soft and steady, the kind of rain that felt like permission. "This is going to be complicated," Claire said. "I know. People are going to have opinions. Let them." She smiled then, small and cautious but real. "Okay." They got engaged on a Saturday morning in April in his garage, surrounded by half-finished furniture and the smell of wood stain. Daniel had been planning something more elaborate, but Claire had shown up early with coffee and a joke about his terrible taste in music, and he had realized there was no better moment than the one they were already standing in. He asked. She said yes. They stood there grinning at each other like idiots until the coffee went cold. The wedding was small. Daniel's sister was there, Claire's parents, a handful of friends who had quietly chosen sides over the last year and chosen theirs. They got married in the backyard under a canopy of string lights that Daniel had hung himself, surrounded by mismatched chairs and potted plants that Claire had insisted on arranging, even though she had no idea what she was doing. The officiant was a retired teacher Claire had worked with for years, a woman with a dry sense of humor who opened the ceremony by saying that she had seen stranger things work out, and this probably would too. When it was over, when the vows had been said and the kiss had been delivered and the small crowd had applauded, Claire leaned close and whispered, "I can't believe you fixed me." Daniel pulled back just enough to look at her. "I didn't fix you. You were never broken." "Then what did you do?" "I just gave you a place to figure out you were already whole." She kissed him again, slower this time, and the string lights swayed gently in the evening breeze. 2 years later, they were still in the same house. Claire had moved her books into the living room and taken over half the garage for a project table where she worked on lesson plans and wrote essays she never published. Daniel had finished the cedar chest and given it to her as an anniversary gift. She kept blankets in it now, the soft, heavy kind that smelled like lavender and were perfect for winter evenings on the couch. They adopted a dog, a 3-legged mutt named Charlie, who had a habit of stealing socks and sleeping under the workbench. Life was quiet. Life was good. One evening in late October, almost exactly 3 years after the night Claire had shown up in the rain, they were sitting on the back porch drinking beer and watching the sunset when Claire said, "Do you ever think about her?" Daniel didn't have to ask who she meant. "Sometimes. Not the way I used to." "Do you think she thinks about us?" "Probably. I hope she's okay." Claire leaned her head against his shoulder. "Me too." They sat there until the sun disappeared and the string lights came on automatically, casting soft yellow light across the yard. The dog barked once from inside the house, impatient for dinner. Claire stood and stretched, then held out her hand. Daniel took it, letting her pull him to his feet, and they went inside together, leaving the empty bottles on the table for later. Sometimes the people who protect you are the ones who see you most clearly. Sometimes the truth costs more than you think you can afford, and you pay it anyway because the alternative is worse. And sometimes love is just two people standing in a garage in the rain, deciding that the risk is worth it. So what would you have done if your ex's best friend showed up at your door and told you the truth? And have you ever had someone defend you when you didn't even know you needed defending? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.